Hey y'all, so let me ask you, do you have any stands that are behaving like this? The top section of the stand has some motion, some spin to it, even though you've tightened up everything to do with the stand. The reason why is that there's actually something broken with the stand. And unlike most things that could break with the stand, this thing is actually repairable. Not only that, you can make it stronger than how it originally came from the factory. So that's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to give you detailed instructions on how you can actually fix this at home. Okay, so let's first take a look at the problem so we know what it is that we're actually trying to fix here. The stand, it has two distinct parts that we care about. There's the downpipe, that's literally the pipe that's going straight down, and what we'll call the top section that sits on top of the downpipe. So if this top section is just sitting on the downpipe, what's actually holding it together? What's preventing it from coming apart? Well, that's where this little hole on the stand is coming into play. The manufacturer, they've drilled a hole that goes through the top section and the downpipe, and they've inserted what's called a roll pin. Sometimes they use a set screw instead, but usually, especially on the cheaper stands and usually on the Gibraltar and the sound percussion stands especially, they're going to be using a roll pin. Let me pause here for a second and explain the difference between a roll pin and a set screw. A set screw is quite literally a screw, and so it has threading on it, and the part it goes into needs to be threaded, and you put it in by using an Allen wrench. So you can easily tell if the thing that you're working with is a set screw, because when you look at it through the hole, it will have a little head to it that has 6 sides. A roll pin, on the other hand, is just a pin. So it's got a smooth side to it, and it actually has a slit that goes along one side. They're actually made a little bit bigger than what is required for the hole. When you bang it in, because of that slit, it's able to collapse in on itself a little bit, gets into the hole, and then it tries to open itself up, and that's what holds it in place. Now, unfortunately, because of how they do this, the amount of material, especially on the roll pins, the amount of material that it comes into contact with is not that much. So that roll pin is very small, and so there's not going to be a lot of strength behind it. So obviously, we need to replace that broken roll pin. That's how we're going to fix it. But how are we going to make this thing stronger then? You should know that usually the inside of that downpipe is actually hollow. A lot of times manufacturers, this is especially true on like the stands that are say 7/8 of an inch or bigger, that those downpipes are made so that you can actually put the arm from your boom stand arm straight into the downpipe, thus converting your boom stand into a straight stand. If you're like me though, you literally never use this feature. And so we're going to use this fact. We're going to basically give up this little conversion feature so that we can use that more material on the opposite side of the stand. We're actually going to take a drill. We're going to drill through to the other side, and we're going to get a roll pin that's long enough to pass through. Now it's going to have contact on 2 sides of the stand. We're basically doubling the amount of surface area it comes into contact with. That should make it much stronger. Now, everything you need to pick up today, you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot. It's all pretty cheap to get these things there. Some of the tools you might already have at home, or your friends or your family members may have them and you could just borrow it from them. Okay, so let's finally get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to knock out that old broken roll pin. You're going to need a hammer for this. I'm going to be using what's called a ball peen hammer, but really any hammer will do. You'll also need what's known as a punch or a punch set. Really, the size punch that you need is going to be the largest size that will still fit into that hole. Now, in my case, my smallest one was actually a little too big. It was 1/8 of an inch, and I needed 7/64 of an inch, but I still managed to make do with that 1/8 inch. Grab your punch, line up the small section with the set screw, and start banging on the back end of the punch with your hammer. 2 things to note: if you're not used to hammering and whatnot, you might want to throw on some safety glasses just for safety's sake. And the other thing is, make sure that the top section and the downpipe are actually lined up correct. It'll make your life a little bit easier. How do you know if they're lined up correct? Well, if whatever motion there is, the correct spot is in the middle of that. So line everything up, throw on your safety glasses, and bang on the punch until the pin comes out. Once it comes out, you'll just want to flip the stand upside down and shake it around so you can get the old broken pin out. Next up, grab a power drill and your drill bits. Now I'm using the imperial or American drill bit sizes. I actually need, as I mentioned before, I need a 7/64 of an inch for my drill bit size. But really it's going to be the largest size that will fit into that pre-drilled hole. Again, make sure the two parts of the stand are perfectly lined up before you start to try to drill on this. Also, I'd recommend, being very careful. That hole that's already there should give you a pretty good guide to make sure that you're going through straight, but you could be going in still a little bit of an angle. In my case, because I was trying to get a good shot of this with the camera, I didn't have it straight down, so I was kind of going at an angle, and I actually didn't drill through myself completely straight. So make sure when you set up the pipe, if you're putting it in a vise or you're holding it or anything, make sure the hole is perfectly straight down so that you're drilling straight down, and make sure you're really eyeballing it first before you go start doing that drilling. Okay, so hold on to that stand tight, start the drill. Don't push too hard because you might break the drill bit. Let the bit do the work. Push a little bit, but not too hard. And for me, it took about a solid minute before I was able to fully drill through the other side. Now it's finally time to deal with the new roll pin. Now, when you go search on a Home Depot site, this might show up as a tension pin or tension roll pin or just plain old roll pin. It's going to be a lot of products out there, but really you have to narrow it down based on size. So you have to deal with the diameter of the roll pin. What's the diameter going to be? In my case, it's like basically 7/64, so really like 1/8 of an inch. My measured distance, if I took a micrometer and actually measured it, it was about 1/8 of an inch. Because of that slit, when it collapses, it's a little bit tighter, right? So my measured size of the roll pin is about 1/8 of an inch, and it's going to collapse down to be able to fit into that 7/64 sized hole. Now, how long of a roll pin do we need? My downpipe is 7/8 of an inch, but that top section sits on top of it. It has some additional diameter to it. So I took a micrometer myself and I checked, and I needed a full 1-inch piece for my roll pin. Now, you can actually get away with a roll pin that is too long, but it will be extremely painful if you do that. So I actually, for this demonstration, went with one that's 1/2 inch too long, so I can show you what to do if you use one that's too long. Hopefully this will discourage you from using one that's too long and using one instead that is the correct size that you actually need. So you'll need to secure this pipe in some way. Either wrap it up in a rag and put it in a vise. You don't want to put it in a vise directly because it'll mess up the chrome finish on you. Or just kind of like place it down or something so you can kind of hold it partially with one hand. Keep in mind, you're going to have to be holding the roll pin and a hammer at the same time. Now, in my case, I didn't put it in the vise, but I did put it on a board. Now, why did I put it on the board? Well, I'm going to be knocking this roll pin through, and I don't want to knock it through too far accidentally, right? So I have it sitting on a block of wood, and that's going to prevent the pin from going through to going too far, right? It's going to end up being flush on the back side after I bang it through. So secure the downpipe, hold the pin with one hand into the hole, and get your hammer and just start banging that thing in. Now, usually, if you have the right size roll pin, you don't want to bang it on the hammer all the way down because you'll start to bang on the stand. So once you get pretty close, you'll want to go back to that punch that you had before, and then you can sit the punch on top of the roll pin and just bang on the punch to get the roll pin in the rest of the way. In my case, since my roll pin was too long, it's not going to go in all the way. It's not going to get that close to the hardware, so I can just freely bang on the roll pin the whole time. Now, as I mentioned, in my case, I did have the problem where it would not go all the way through because the back side of it, that pin, was not meeting up with the hole I drilled. So what did I have to do? Well, at that point, I could see where the roll pin was trying to come out, so I kind of cheated. I just took my drill again and I basically drilled out a hole to accept where the pin wanted to go, which is not great and it's pretty ugly, but it did work and it is holding it tight there. At this point, if you use the correct size pin, then you're done. If you didn't use the correct size pin, now you're getting to the worst, most difficult part of this whole process. So, we have a pin, it's sticking out too far. What are we gonna do about that? Well, we're gonna get a hacksaw and we're gonna cut off the rest of that pin. In my case, I tried wrapping up the stand a little bit with some painter's tape. It's just to try to protect the chrome finish, but I did not do a very good job of protecting the chrome finish. But yeah, you're gonna have to really work on that pin. It's gonna actually take quite a while. Once you get maybe halfway through the pin, you can actually switch just getting a hammer and just banging on that excess part of the pin. So if the downpipe is like this and the pin is sticking out, you just bang straight down on that pin and it should snap the rest of it off. But you do have to cut by hand about half of it, and it's probably going to damage a little bit of the chrome. So I highly recommend you do get the correct size roll pin to begin with. Oh, and by the way, definitely wear gloves when you're working with a saw. You don't want to be cutting yourself, hurting yourself, right? Breaking your hands in process of trying to fix your stand. So I hope you guys found that useful. I do have other videos coming out all the time, other tips on your drum gear and reviews on cymbals and sticks and recording gear and lessons, all sorts of good stuff related to drums, everything related to drums. So if you don't want to miss out, then don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, peace.